It's what you've been waiting for, and it's finally here. The Atlantic League preview and the start of the Indie Ball season is upon us this week on the Indie Ball Report podcast. Yeah, right. We are back again, episode number 216 of the Indie Ball Report podcast. I'm Nick, he's Will, and that was a huge rundown that I just hit in one breath. There's
the saying that, big time players make big time plays, and in big time moments, that's what you just did there.
I tried to be a 16-game player. There's not enough of those around, so hopefully I could try to fill the need a little bit, and hopefully this is the start to a successful show, because there is a lot of fun stuff going on this week. We have like 3 pieces of news, but nobody really cares about that. What we care about is the fact that as we record, we're like 20 minutes away from independent league baseball being played, even though it's on Flow Sports, so nobody can watch it. But it's still fun to know it's existing.
Nick, you'll just have to, guys, you'll have to take our word for it that baseball will be played.
Exactly. Like, I'm sure there's some radio streams you can listen to confirm that it exists, but
yes.
But yeah, it's funny though. Like, did you see the happy opening day post from the Atlantic League?
I did, and I know exactly what you're about to say, so you might as well just say it.
Man, they got killed in those replies.
Oh, I can't imagine why.
Yeah, it's great because they were like, "What game are you guys watching?" And everyone's like, none of them, because it's on Flow Sports. Flow Sports is terrible. Then you have someone would love to watch this game, but I can't.
I literally gagged when I got that notification on my phone.
Yeah.
I'm not even kidding me. And so, because, all right, you know what? We're going to start here, and I'm going to be, I promise you, we have so much to get to, so I'm going to make this really quick.
Yeah.
But the post said, "Happy opening day. Cannot wait to watch every game this season on @Flow Sports." First of all, you're a league tweeting. You're not a person. Who can't wait to watch every game up this season on Flow Sports? Like,
we, the people of the league.
Are you personifying like a league? Like, or is this, if it was like a person who tweeted that, like, I'm all right. Like, go ahead. Like, from a personal account. And what game are you watching today? And then, what up? None, not paying for that. Thanks for taking it anyway. Thanks for taking it away. Flow Sports, not a good outlet. The production value needs to be improved, all that good stuff. So, yeah.
Why on Flow Sports, not Facebook or YouTube?
Yep.
Oh, God. All of it's great. And then you got some quote tweets, too, although one of them's me. So, yeah. And then you just got one person that, I guess they just kept replying to all the other replies, calling people poor. So, I think it was supposed to be tongue-in-cheek, because when that was sent, I remember seeing it was like a changed handle to be like Rick White's alter ego or something like that. So
interesting.
Yeah, it was supposed to be funny like that. But hey, either way, glad to see the Atlantic League's off to a strong start in the fan department, because Lord knows it's going to be a fun season for them, dealing with all that comes with the joy of being on Flow Sports, because I'm sure it will go well. But
I love Flow Sports.
How could you not? I mean, maybe we should just put this show on Flow Sports, only on Flow Sports.
What if we just took the podcast off of everything and just put it as a Flow Sports stream? It's going to be great when our ratings go to 0.
It honestly would probably drop to single digits.
It would. Well, I don't know.
Oh my God! But think, we could be the exclusive content they talked about.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a ridiculous thought.
Yeah. I'm sure Flow Sports pays well, but before we talk about that Flow Sports League, we have a different Flow Sports League to talk about, and that's the Frontier League, because they had a draft. And this is one of the 3 pieces of news we have to get through before we get to our preview. So we're going to hit this real quick, because it's the Frontier League draft, and there was barely anybody that we actually recognized on the list of players that were there. Scrappy Hopkins was in there too. She was a catcher for, I believe it was Lexington last year, and did decently. Honestly, did pretty decent. She didn't get drafted, but she made it to day 2, so good for her. Notable names picked. There was only 34 people taking the draft. It was 3 rounds, but round 3 was really just 3 picks. Tim Sabo, Brian Leaf, and Jacob Talamanti were the only 3 names I even remotely recognized. So good on them. I believe they all got time in the Frontier League last year. I know Ottawa had one of them. I think Sussex had the other one. And for whatever reason, I feel like it was like the Wild Things that had the other. So, still some notable names. Guys got picked up. Everybody got 2 except for Empire State that only picked 1 guy despite having the first pick in each round.
Can I say something, Nick?
Yeah.
Out of all the teams that would not pick someone in the Frontier League draft, as far as like the first 2 rounds, the Empire State Grays being the only team to pass, if there were betting lines for this, and there was all right, there's going to be one team who passes in the second round, and if you guessed Empire State, you'd be rich. You'd be a rich person.
Well, in fairness, they now have J.R.D. Sarcina, so he's going to save the season. Yeah,
I remember him.
Yeah, I'm going to say, and I think Mike Giolito, I think got picked up there too. I think they made a deal with High Point for him, but either way, I will say Empire State has some improved talent. Mark Mason's brought in some guys. That being said, I'm not falling for this. I'm not falling for them. I know
this last year.
Yeah, they're still going to be trash because they're a traveling team and it just comes with the territory. So I'm not falling for this. I'm familiar with their game. They can't fool me. I
saw the first overall pick, Joan Valdez. I don't know. Apparently, he was up to 93 or 94 in this camp.
Really?
So that's I saw that on social media. So I'm gonna everything you see on social media is true. So because surely no one has ever tweeted out a juiced up velo marking. But you know what? Yeah, but that's the only thing I really saw because, I'm not, of course, we don't really know any of these names, but that doesn't mean there's a lot of good players that come out of this, out of this camp and guys especially that are rookies. And it's important. It's important for these teams to scout, especially in the Frontier League to, scout out their own camp because, those rookie spots and usually the teams that get production from those 10 spots are the ones that are at the top of the standings come the end of the year.
Oh, definitely. Those spots they're required to have, those are the ones where they're make or break, like you're saying. And JRD Sarcina is on there. There's a couple other guys here. Josh Sears is on this team too. They actually got some decent talent. I'm not going to lie. The Empire State Grays roster, it's funny, under experience for one guy, they just have Cleveland Indians second round pick.
Wait, what?
Yeah, Quentin Holmes, Cleveland Indians second round pick.
I thought you meant like it was listed as Cleveland Indians second round pick.
Well, for his experience, that's what it is. Same thing with Eric Jenkins, who is a Texas Rangers second pick. It's interesting. Some of them have like team names, others don't. Although I will say, I'm looking at the overall construction here. They do look like a better team. That said, it is funny as hell seeing a vet on this team.
I agree.
They have 3 veterans, actually.
It's good.
4 vets, 5 vets. Yeah, they have a lot of former York Revolution players. And a former Duck, too, from Hauppauge.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so they got...
Long Island?
Yeah, so they got some guys. I think they actually... Wait, hold up here. Does this guy have Major League experience? I know this is not supposed to be an Empire State show, but I just see under one player.
Who's the player?
God, you're going to make me pronounce his name.
Oh, jeez.
Peguero? Matthew Peguero? Pitcher?
Wait.
Tampa Bay Rays?
Matthew Peguero?
Yeah.
No, now I'm going to have to spell Peguero in the...
Peguero.
Did not reach the bigs.
Okay.
I think I've seen him in spring training before. That's must have where I know the name.
Okay. Because I was going to say, it said Tampa Bay Rays, so for a second I was like, oh? Did they have...
He's only 23, this guy.
Okay, well that would make sense. It'd be kind of odd if he was 23, already flamed down the majors and wound his way up here.
That'd be pretty hilarious, honestly. I don't even know how someone would do that.
I would imagine it wouldn't be on the field related.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to wrap up the Empire League draft, only 3 other teams took a player that took more than 2 players, rather. Windy City, Lake Erie, and Joliet all took 3 guys. So, there you go. That's all there really is to say about the Frontier League draft. And in like 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to talk about the Empire State Greys in depth when we do the Frontier League preview. But that's like a month from now. So we'll worry about that when we get to that bridge. What we have to talk about from here on in is straight baseline Atlantic League. Just only Atlantic League. Because we're starting with Hagerstown. Because we all love Hagerstown. Because now Hagerstown has a GM. They don't have a name, but they got a GM. And that GM is David Bleckstone. He previously ran the athletic department for a Catholic high school in the area, and his father owned the Hagerstown Suns prior to their even arrival in Hagerstown, but he owned them from 87 to 2001. He was the Suns GM from 96 to 01, and that's the important information about Bleckstone. That's all you need to know about him. We have more information about Hagerstown, but let's just test the GM first before we get to the rest of the information.
Yeah, I think it seems like a pretty solid hire. I mean, just the fact that he's got experience running, he's got experience like in front offices and minor league baseball in general is certainly a good thing. Of course, independent baseball is it's a whole different animal when it comes to how you run it and just the different intricacies in being in the front office. But yeah, I mean, at least on the surface, seems like a pretty good hire for Hagerstown, even though they're still a little bit away from getting going.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, any sort of experience is solid here. It's kind of a bit odd how you're making the transition from being a high school AD to now running a team. Obviously, there's experience there in the past, and he grew up around this with his father owned, a baseball team for 13, 14 years. You're going to be familiar with the day-to-day operations as well as, being in the front office and things of that nature. So he'll be familiarized with that. So that's a positive there. Plus, it seems like Frederick, and we'll talk about Frederick in more detail in just a second, but it seems like Frederick's going to be there. You're going to have Southern Maryland and Waldorf there as well. So you're going to have a bunch of local teams, plus even York and Lancaster aren't terribly far, I don't believe, from Hagerstown either. So
no.
You're going to have a lot of, local teams to draw off of too, to try and help maybe do some joint marketing, or at the very least, to be there to help get people interested there. You're going to have a brand new ballpark as well, which is a huge draw and a huge benefit as well. So there's a lot going in his favor too. So that's going to be very helpful. As far as, like you said, the actual GM job, it's a lot different when it's an independent league versus a affiliated league, because the affiliated league, it's a lot more, general manager of an actual business as opposed to a sports club where you're doing a lot of the transactional work as well. You don't worry about it as much in the affiliate leagues because, well, your roster's kind of taken care of, and what the club above you is saying is what you're doing. So on this level, when you don't have that, you're going to react a little bit differently. So it's hard to judge it when it's affiliate experience, but experience is still good nonetheless.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it at least seems like a solid hire. I'm excited to see as Hagerstown starts to get closer, and something that we've been talking about for a while.
Yeah,
so.
Certainly. And then just to wrap up on the Hagerstown news, this is more related to the team as opposed to the people running it. Chuck Domino is now involved in it. His company is running the branding on it. If you remember Chuck Domino, that's because he's involved in the Charleston Dirty Birds. He was involved, I believe, in Lexington as well. He previously owned, I guess it was the West Virginia Power when they were that, and then they came over to the Atlantic League, and we all remember how that went. He's been deeply involved in the Atlantic League, to say the least. He's going to help kind of create the brand of the team, the logo, the whole nine there. So I'd expect fairly similar results to what we're going to see in Frederick, because Domino was also involved in that branding too, even though we don't know the Frederick branding quite yet. We're going to find that out in June. So as far as a little continuation on that branding goes, there's going to be a name the team contest for the Hagerstown Club. That's going to run from May 22nd to June 2nd. And then they're going to pick 5 semifinalists. And then there'll be a vote from June 16th to June 30th on that, with a July 13th announcement for the branding and merch unveil. So that process is moving a lot quicker than some of the other rebrands or new brands we've seen there, certainly. So on that kind of a fun note, if you are a Hagerstown fan or you plan to be supporting the Hagerstown Club, there's your chance for input. We always say it, but We'll say it again. All that information available in the show notes. And I'm sure when we have a link to any sort of name the team contest, we'll put that up there as well.
I can't say I've ever seen a time where a team goes into the season without a name, but here we are in uncharted territory, though. But I'm nonetheless glad the team's in Frederick, though. It's something I've wanted for a long time.
Yeah, Hagerstown and Frederick are going to be fantastic ads here. And speaking of Frederick, we look over there for this next little piece of news and the last piece of news before the preview. The Keys ownership, as well as I'm going to call them the question marks until we have a proper name for this Atlantic League club in Frederick. The Keys and the question marks ownership has signed a 10-year lease extension with another 10-year option with the city of Frederick. So they will be there for at least another 10 years. That 10-year option, it is, I assume, mutually has to be agreed upon. It's not one side or the other there. The lease in year 1 and 2 will cost $25,000 annually. Then from years 3 through 10, $125,000 annually. And then in years 11 through 20, if that option is picked up, it will be $150,000 annually. Although in the article, it does make it clear that the Keys are still committed to getting a professional development license. And it does seem they still have some sort of a working relationship with the Baltimore Orioles, of course, the team they were previously affiliated with. So make of that what you shall. Also note that in that particular Frederick ballpark, there is renovations going on. They are putting money into it, so it does seem like they are making a push to get an affiliated team, and who really knows what will happen if that comes to pass.
Yeah, I think it's so unpredictable too, because at the end of the day, like, that's great that Frederick wants to become affiliated again, but at the end of the day, like, you also have to look at it from the flip side. There's going to have to be another team that gets cut in order for Frederick to jump in. So unfortunately, there's no real precedent for that yet. I'm not saying there won't be.
Oh, there will be soon enough.
But it's still so fresh and still so new, the new minor league system, really. So I think that as time goes on, we'll start to see how much of a precedent there is where literally like affiliates are like flip-flopping and stuff like that. So I don't know. I think most teams would want to be affiliated if possible. I think every team would rather be affiliated if that's possible. So,
I mean, Long Island was approached and they said no, so there's that.
Is that true?
Supposedly, that's what at least I remember hearing, is that the Ducks were one team that was approached, but they were like, yeah, we're good. I don't know if it just happened to be whatever the deal was they didn't like. Maybe it's Frank Bolton likes being in charge of whatever Frank Bolton owns. I don't know. But I do remember hearing that they were approached and they were like, we're good.
Interesting.
Yeah, but they're definitely the outlier too. Like, let's be clear about that.
They're the exception, not the rule.
Exactly, 100% there. So it'll be interesting to see with Frederick there, because I totally get, like you said, being affiliated saves you a lot of expense, and in the grand calculus of everything, the benefits of being affiliated almost certainly outweigh the negatives of being affiliated, especially when you view. If you don't view, having that roster control, if you don't view playing to win the game as the most important thing, especially from an ownership perspective, your only objective is to just, make the money back, to come as close to making money or to make as much money as you possibly can, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense to be affiliated, because now you're going to get rehab players. You're going to be able to put a major league logo on your patch. And if they're a local team or the popular team in your region, I mean, you're going to have a lot of a big benefit there, plus prospects coming through. And it just seems a bit more official to the casual person, right? So I get it. I certainly do. Obviously, that's not necessarily the case. If you want to win and you want to see the higher quality of baseball, I probably put most independent leagues against a large chunk of affiliated teams and say the independent team's better. I think AAA is probably the exception there, but AAA is like a top 5 league in the world too. So like, let's, in perspective. But yeah, so I think it's interesting from an Atlantic League perspective at the very least, because if you were to lose Frederick halfway through, what's the plan, right?
Exactly. So I don't know. Should be interesting to see, but I do agree that that at the end of the day, and I guess outside of Long Island, if you have the opportunity to become affiliated, you take that opportunity.
Exactly. That's just part of doing business if you're on the independent league level right now. And like I said, I'm going to be interested to see what the precedent is that gets set. Like, how is the marketplace going to work for teams like this, for minor league baseball going forward? It's going to be very, very interesting. On that note, I think we could just jump right to the preview now. We got through the news in a timely 21 minutes. So we have just a preview to get through. And I say that like it's not going to take, an hour plus to do this preview. And obviously, for those that are sticking with us from the past, 4 or 5 years of previews, you are familiar with how we do things here, but we're going to change it up a bit, because just doing one team or one division at a time and then saying, okay, this to this to this, it's a bit too methodical, I think. I think you lose a little bit of interest and you don't really get as good of a sense of each of the teams. So this year we're going to change it up a little bit, and if the Atlantic League one goes well, then we'll repeat it for the other 3 leagues. If it doesn't, then we can always go back to the old way of doing things, right? So this year we're going to look at the better batting teams. We're going to look at the better pitching teams. We're going to look at some well-rounded teams and, some teams that aren't that well-rounded, that aren't particularly good, let's say. And then we'll go through it and we'll ask some important questions about each of these teams' futures in the near term. And we'll give you some predictions to wrap it up at the very end. So with that said, we're going to kick it off with some rather strong batting teams. You know what? I just realized something.
What's that?
I forgot to say that we have basic information to go over. The standard shit. Probably should go over that right now.
So as far as for the basic info, of course, 126 games in the Atlantic League season. First half, second half, all that good jazz. Opening day, which when everyone will hear it, will be when everyone hears this, the season will already be ongoing, given that opening day is the day we're recording this, Friday, April 28th. And of course, the first and second half champions get an automatic bid to the playoffs. The new rules, as we went over extensively, the double hook DH rule is back. Only one disengagement per at bat for pitchers, so something that will certainly come into play and something we will talk about a lot, as well as the designated pinch runner, where a team can designate one player to come in the game and pinch run, and then you could just re-enter the starter back into the game. You can only do that once, and with the new teams being in, as well as the Frederick question marks, and of course the Lexington counter clocks, the Lexington Legends. Have some thoughts on them later, but that's what we're going into.
Yep, definitely. It's already weird seeing teams posting like the graphics that have like DPR on it. Because at first I was like, what does DPR mean? And I was like, oh wait, that's their pinch runner. It's kind of weird to see on like a starting lineup graphic.
Yeah, I know. It's odd.
It certainly is. And just as a reminder, first and second half champions make the postseason. If there's a repeat champion, we go to a wild card, which instead of using either the first or second half, uses the full year records, which again, it just seems very arbitrary to say if there's a tiebreaker, the full year counts, but if not, then just what you did in the last 2-3 months matters. So, my thoughts on that playoff system are well known. How I think if we're going to be doing this, we should just use the full, year record and just take the top 2 teams at the end of the year from each division. But, that would make way too much sense. And just in case people are wondering when the first and second half end, first half ends on July the 7th and the second half ends on September the 17th. So there is that. We already mentioned we're excited to see what Frederick can do. We've mentioned in the past that counterclocks rebrand is sketchy. Not the best.
It's a way to say it.
Yeah. You see their logo, or you see their jerseys rather?
The counterclocks?
Yeah.
Are they rough?
Yeah. It's essentially a standard white on white with a single pinstripe, right by the buttons, like that going on each side. Red pinstripe on it, yeah. And right smack in the middle is the giant counterclock C that says counterclocks on it.
Well, not a fan, to say the least.
Yeah, like, I'll put it like this. The design could have been saved if they would have just went to a pullover jersey as opposed to a button-down. It would have at least looked better, but now you have this giant C running right across the buttons in the middle. So it just looks
electric.
Awkward. It looks awkward as hell. And the thing is, too, you could have just put, like, a mirrored version of the word counterclocks across the front of the chest. So that way it read counterclocks, but backwards. You could have done that. You could have ripped off the Cubs design and just put the C over the chest. There's options. There's a lot of options.
Gotta be different.
Yeah.
Gotta be different.
Yeah. They could have went with the little mascot to do it on the horse, put that off to a side too, you know, and that could have looked kind of cool, especially with like a blue jersey there. Maybe go with like some sort of like a jockey silks design as well there. Cause like they're in Kentucky and they're embracing the racehorsing now. So you really could get kind of creative with this. I mean, look at like any major horse race. Look at the silks on the different jockeys. There's good designs there. You can utilize that, especially you go with like the famous Kentucky Derby winner ones. You know, like go with like a Secretariat silks look. You could take from that kind of thing and draw inspiration from it. I'm just saying there's a lot that could have been done with it, but you know, we've said enough on this rebrand.
Yeah, we've said enough. Baseball's interesting. Their baseball team's interesting too, but I'll hold off on that.
Yeah, certainly. And this, to quickly look back at 2022, Southern Maryland won the first half by 12 games. Gastonia also took their first half by 6 games. Lancaster came up, kind of surprised us all, had a really strong second half, won the second half by 9 games. Gastonia continued to cruise. They were seeming to be the preeminent favorite to win the championship. They won the second half by 10 games. They didn't really look weak at all. At any point, High Point got the wild card, and then High Point made the final by knocking off Gastonia in what I think we could safely call an upset. Lancaster also made the final. Maybe not as much of an upset, seeing as Southern Maryland kind of tapered off a little bit in the second half, but still probably was the better team on paper. But, you know, games aren't played on paper, and that's why in the final, Lancaster swept High Point in 3 games to notch their 3rd championship, their first since 2014, and that was really the only notable on-the-field play, or important play, I should say, that will matter for this.
Yeah, I think it was quite it was a unique year in the Atlantic League last year, to put it mildly, and just because I think you saw a lot of teams that really exploded onto the scene that we haven't seen for a while. That we haven't seen be in like legit contention for a while. I mean, I think the number one story out of everything had to be the remarkable turnaround of the Honey Hunters last year. And I think that undoubtedly has to be that number one story, and the job that Goose Gazzo did with that squad was remarkable. Of course, the Barnstormers winning the championship. I mean, High Point's just been consistently good at this point. And then, of course, Long Island bouncing back is going to be can they bounce back is a big headline, a big storyline going into this year.
Oh, certainly. And I think that's a great point that you made there. We saw some different teams that hadn't had as much success as of recent, really kind of jump up and take the reins. You know, a High Point team that, you know, they've always kind of consistently took that next step. They kept doing that this year. They made the postseason year 1. Year 2 was kind of a little bit of a drop off, but they still did fine, you know, and then last year they said, okay, we're going to take the next step. We want a playoff round, and then they didn't do well in the final. So is it going to be another one step back to take a step forward, or is it going to be a continued it? Gastonia's turnaround, like you said, was by far the story of the year. I mean, any team put up the numbers they did, any team steals over 300 bases like they do, we're going to talk about that for a long time. And, you know, to see them go in the first round was kind of surprising, but still it made things interesting. And Lancaster had not been a good team for a non-insignificant amount of time, to be quite honest. And it had been the Ducks division for a very, very long time, and was almost, you know, I don't keep saying very long time, but, you know, for a while, it was like, okay, Long Island in one half, Somerset in the other half, and being that Somerset's not here anymore, Long Island kind of had a bad year. it opened the door to some real excitement in the North, and a lot of different things could have happened, and we got probably the most entertaining of them all, and hopefully we get more dramatics like that this year. And I'm looking forward to see what we're going to be talking about this time next year, when everything's all said and done. And that starts by looking forward to the rosters in 2023.
The true start of baseball season is when the Indie Ball report starts looking at the rosters for the upcoming season. But a lot of good names, a lot of talent. Excited to break it down.
Absolutely. And, it's a tradition unlike any other when we go ahead and we preview a roster of which we'll probably have 50+% turnover by this time in September. So it makes you wonder why we do it, but we also do it because there's going to be one or two guys on each team that stay the whole year and really just ball out. And the way a roster is constructed early on kind of gives you an idea as to the way that team wants to approach the season, certainly. And it could tell you a lot going forward what it's all about. As we start our descent into these 2023 teams, I'll always throw the caveat in of these rosters are never set in stone until pretty much an hour before first pitch. I've been working on getting all these things done. I waited to the last second to get them done. I didn't start the preview until Thursday. So whatever we have on here, we have on here. We may mention some guys that by the time you listen to this wound up being cut. We may not mention a guy that made the team. We may talk about someone that made a different team than the one we talk about them on. That's just part of the danger of doing this. So if we misspeak on one player, or we miss a guy, or we talk about someone that you're going to say, oh, well, he's actually been in Mexico for 2 weeks, that's why. Because it's really hard to keep track of all these rosters, because they're really not set in stone until first pitch, and you never really know what happens with that. So with that said, that warning given, we're going to get it started with some of the better batting teams, at least on paper here. And I got to be honest, there's one player that kind of surprised me, and it's over on York's side of things. But the one guy I'm looking at, he played in Mexico last year, Otasaka, is a solid ball player. I'm kind of surprised he's here. And I think when I look overall at the Revs team, I see a team that really does have some potential to be a better hitting team than they were in the past. There's some guys here that I feel like are primed for something. Obviously in York, power isn't necessarily a thing we look at, but Nelly Rodriguez was a very reliable bat for them last year. And I don't know why. I just get the sense of they have a lot more to tell here, because there's some AAA talent. There's some talent from other leagues as well. And under Rick Forney, I just have a good feeling about this.
It's when you mentioned when you did the lead in, Nick, as far as good offensive teams, York was definitely the one that I was going to hit on too, because I see a lot of potential with this lineup. And look, York scoring runs is not a new concept, because that's generally what you do based on the ballpark they play in. I mean, Tomo Otasaka, I think, is a guy that is going to be fascinating to watch this year too. Is definitely more of a high contact guy, and I think gives York, I think, a new dimension of athleticism that they haven't had, and not that they, haven't been able to score runs, but a lot of their lineups over the last few years under Mark Mason have been kind of built around the solo home run ball. Yeah. And which, could work sometimes, didn't work very much last year. Not to say there is a lot of power in this with this team. You mentioned, of course, Nelly Rodriguez too, coming off 26 home runs last year. I'll tell you one guy I'm really intrigued by, Nick, and is a Major League Baseball prospect freak myself. Drew Mendoza. He last year spent most of the year with High A Wilmington. Has gotten up to Double A before. He's a guy. He was a very well thought of prospect. Yeah. He was a guy that was very, very highly regarded for his bat. He was a very good college player. And he was drafted high. He just didn't in that system just didn't really pan out. However, we have seen a lot of cases where indie ball has kind of been has really been that turning point, for guys when they kind of fizzle out of a initial farm system, whether expectations were there or not, or whatever this case may be. They have a stint in indie ball, and then a team picks them up and likes them again. And Mendoza is a guy that I am really intrigued by in this York lineup. So I think there's and certainly there's other guys I like a lot. And Trey Martin I think Trey Martin's a fantastic addition in this lineup. That Rick Forney brought over. Stokes certainly as well, brings
nice
a little bit of power.
Yep.
Yeah. So I really think that this York lineup is going to be up there among the best in the league for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even Deion Stanford's another guy who came in from Winnipeg too. He's not a bad hitting catcher. I'm not expecting a ton out of most catchers, from an offensive perspective here, but it's still a guy. He put up 8 home runs in Winnipeg, and, he hit for a little bit extra there. He's putting up about a run every other game. So obviously not walking a ton. His on base isn't great, but still he had over 1 base a game, close to, I believe, about a base and a quarter a game. So he's not terrible there. He doesn't strike out too much either, less than 1 of those a game. So overall, I think he's a nice little kind of subtle piece as well there. But when we look at other really solid hitting teams in the South, particularly, I think there's a couple of teams there that are really solid in that regard. And it starts with High Point for me. Like, they have some good pitchers too, and I suppose we could talk about them as one of the more well-rounded teams. But for me, I look at the batting on this team, and guys like Bennett Klinsky jump out to me. There's some other guys there as well, like Michael Russell, a guy who's hit for average pretty consistently. Mike Martinez, another guy there, former Major League talent there as well. And then you have guys like Xander Weil, guys like TJ Bennett, a solid addition there. He was really good for Lake Country. They're playing for his dad last year. And this year's been kind of the theme of Atlantic leagues taking away sons from father managers. Casey Hobson jumps back over here to Southern Maryland this year as well. And then a guy that American Association fans will also know in Ryan Grootjohn, a solid player for the Monarchs in the past. He comes over here as well. This seems to be a really solid lineup from Jamie Keefe and company, and I really like the potential that comes here. Now, you may look at Grootjohn's kind of combined numbers from his time in AA and in the American Association, and it may not look as great, but if you just look at those Monarch numbers, he's a guy that put up numbers there. And of course, there's also some other guys here. I see there's a Pecos leaguer as well, which who really knows what to make of them, but every once in a while they kind of surprise you.
Well, Grootjohn's also a guy that his batting average won't jump out at you at 236, but hell, he got on base at a 391 clip. I don't give a damn what your batting average is if you're getting on at a 391 clip on base. I mean, that's good enough. That's good enough for me to put you at the top of the lineup. I mean, I think that it's hard to find guys it's hard to find a better building block than a guy like Bennett Klinsky and Xander Weil in the middle of the order. Quincy Lattimore seems like has been a power threat that he sometimes he'll go to Mexico for a couple of months, then he'll come back. But yeah, I think this High Point team's excellent. They're not to get too ahead of myself, but they're one of my teams that I love coming into the year. And they're a team, and Shed Long, another guy who's a decently well thought of prospect with Seattle. And,
I think he also got a little bit of major league time as well.
He did.
Yep.
Yes, he did. So, I think it's been a couple of years since that happened, but I mean, he's another, intriguing piece as well. And I think, and another team, I think offensively, I'd be, remiss if I didn't, talk about is Gastonia.
Oh, yeah.
Just because they're a team that, they're not a team that's going to blow you away with power, but the speed that they showed last year was just insane. And when you combine that with, and this is a really important point about the fact that the one disengagement per at bat, speed is going to become even more important. Gastonia has it, but when we also talk about, they probably needed, you think about come playoff time and in short series, what do you need? You need some power guys. Yeah. And that's what, we've seen that consistently in any playoff game. So, what did they do? They go out and they add Carlos Franco. So
really solid ball player there. I mean, 31 home runs last year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Franco's has been a terrific hitter in this league for quite a while, and so I think Gastonia adding Franco, I think gives that lineup a new dimension of power that again, the best teams that I come to find are teams that have it all. They have the speed, they have the contact guys, they have the power guys that are not all built around one ideal and one facet. And those are the teams that I think, and the battle that between Gastonia and High Point this year, to me, is going to be fascinating, because I think both these teams are fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. And especially onto the point of Franco there, he's not just, a power guy. He still hit for nearly 285, and he still got on base almost with a 400. And he's got nearly 75 walks too. He gets on base.
Struck out under 100 times for a guy who hit 30 plus homers. That's a rare feat.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's a really, really solid ball player there in every which way you look at it. Plus you add in a guy like, say, a JC Esquera too behind the plate. That's another nice addition here. He provides a little bit of power, only 12 home runs, but that was in 70 games too. So, he's good for one every 7 games or so, which I get you play 5-game series, 3-game series, so you may not get one on that particular day, but still he provides that threat of it. You never know when you're going to quite get it. And if everybody else can just get on base and do their job, then you look pretty solid. I mean, you look up and down the whole lineup here, at least on the preview sheet, everybody's at a pretty respectable number for their batting average, for their on-base percentage, for the walks they're drawing. Obviously the speed's still here. A guy like Zach Garrett coming back is a huge addition there. A guy, he puts up, 32 stolen bases. You bring in another guy, or you return another guy with 55 stolen bases, and Jack Reimheimer, former major leaguer, of course, too. But you look overall at this team, and they do seem to be one of the better batting teams. And the last point I'll make on them, at least for their batting for now, is J.R. Davis is a very sneaky good player. He doesn't really jump out at you, but he did very well in Evansville. If for nothing else, then he never really was bad. He may be kind of, middle of the road, milquetoast to use a big word, where he wasn't blowing off the stat page, but he would never be bad. And if you can just consistently hit mid 270s, chip in a home run every couple of weeks, just go about, do your job, provide offense, get on base, don't be a liability. If you could just do that like he does, you're going to find your way onto a lot of teams, because that has a lot of value. And likewise, there's a lot of guys here too with some upper level minor league experience, double, triple A, maybe some other kind of secondary leagues that kind of run adjacent to those affiliated minor systems. So yeah, Gastonia is a great one to bring up, Will, in that this is a really solid team from a batting perspective.
If I could add one more player too on the as far as Gastonia, a guy that Atlantic League fans probably don't know the name of, but is a guy that I think is a potential breakout candidate. Stephen Moya. So he is the name. He didn't play last year. He played in Japan for quite a few years. I think parts of 4 seasons in Japan. In the NPB. He's a guy first of all, he is a mountain of a man, a left-handed swinger, 6'7", 260 pounds.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he's
a linebacker.
He's had some big power seasons, in the past. Most recently had a 23 home run season in Japan, in 2019. Now, doesn't walk a lot, so that part of the profile worries me a little bit. However, I think coming down from Japan to a league like the Atlantic League, especially if the pitching isn't always great, if you're looking for guys who could potentially break out and really kind of form into their power, he's still 31 years old, so still in plenty good physical shape. I think Moya is a guy that intrigues me as a potential breakout candidate.
He definitely does. I mean, if he's putting up those kinds of numbers in MPB, I have to imagine they're going to translate to the Atlantic League. I do wonder. I mean, there's not even really any sort of experimental rule that I think would harm him in any way. I mean, honestly, he may be the kind of guy, just at that size, I got to imagine he doesn't move that great. He's not that fast of a runner. So he may be the kind of guy that you see a designated pinch runner for a lot, especially with Gastonia, where you are able to kind of have the luxury of having one or two really fast guys on the bench that you could say, all right, you're going to be our pinch runner for the day. I mean, there's certainly some potential for that there, I think there. And I don't want to make this too much of a Honey Hunters bit here because I don't want to spend too much time on one team, but Sensley is another guy I look at. Limited Frontier League experience, and who knows how that's going to transfer over. But there's something about him where I just get this sense like he could potentially jump up. Again, not the most, Gastonia players here, but I feel like there's something there. I don't know why. That name just jumps out at me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team with a lot of good players, and I mean that's why they were so good last year. But I think another team as well. I think offensively that we talked about because of the big names, and again the preface for Long Island Ducks baseball is always we have no idea what this team is going to look like by the end of the season. But then again, whenever you have Daniel Murphy in your lineup, you got to give the team a chance. So I think how Murphy does is going to be really interesting. I think Boog Powell's a great piece as well at the top of the lineup. Adani Echeverria, too, for however long that he sticks around. Like Phil Caulfield a lot as well. He's good, more of a contact guy as well, and other nice pieces in this lineup too. Your Sam Travis, your Ruben Tejadas. I don't think, at least on the surface for the Ducks, you don't see a guy that jumps out like, yeah, you see names. I got that you see names. I don't see a star, but I see a lot of depth, and I see a lot of depth in this lineup to begin the year.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to come back to them in a little bit because they definitely fall into that well-rounded category, at least in my mind, because they do have some solid pitching here with guys like Iorio Jose, Kuzia, guys like that. I think they're worthy of more of the, kind of joint one here, but to spend some time on them for the batting portion of this, Hechavarria definitely jumps out here. Tejada being kind of like a secondary mention, and Lynn being another guy that's kind of like a secondary mention. It's kind of crazy to me that we're just kind of like, yeah, they're there too. They're part of the all MLB infield that they have. And you're right, where we never really know what the team's going to wind up looking like at the end of the season here. But when guys like Dustin Woodcock are 50-50, they're making your lineup, despite having a very solid year last year. Batting about 250, yes, but 16 home runs and providing some real offense on a team that wasn't particularly strong offensively last year in Long Island. I mean, you want to go back and look at the Long Island rankings for offense, 8th in runs. Yeah, they were 2nd in hits, but they were 7th in home run and 7th in total bases. I mean, what really came through for them overall was kind of getting those hits. It was kind of 50-50 for them offensively. They weren't the best of teams in that regard, batting 272 as a offensive unit. And yeah, they had some guys like DeCarlo come up, Diaz had performed, but they really were just a shaky team in that regard where you had like 4 guys. This is the offense. Hopefully other guys can chip in today. And you need to at least have some reliable performers that once in every 3 days they're going to do well. So that way, those core 3 guys, they always will be good, and you can have at least another 3 showing up in the lineup. And they didn't really have that last year. And it seems like they definitely addressed that, if for nothing else, with the infield grouping. And, we didn't even mention the fact that Anthony Perroni's also there now behind the plate, which is a solid catcher too. The numbers may not look like it, but he is a really good catcher as well.
Yeah, defensively, he's a good piece. But you're right. I think it's a well-rounded, a well-rounded group. But the infield in particular is really good. But I think it's just a matter of, can they stick together? How do they perform? And offensively, just need a little bit more thump than they did last year. Definitely.
And on that note, I do want to switch over to the pitching here, because I think there's some definitely really good pitching teams, some solid pitching teams here. And you can't talk about Atlantic League pitching without starting in Southern Maryland. This is a team that I feel like it's going to be similar to last year in that it's live and die by pitching here. There's a lot of really good players here. Darryl Thompson goes without even needing an introduction. We know he's going to be the backbone of this team's pitching staff, and he's going to defy every aging curve known to man until the end of his career. Mitch Lamson was a very solid player last year. Sandro Cabrera is a guy coming in from Washington who looks to be a really, really good pitcher, was in the Frontier League, and I think he can replicate that. Certainly, he's at the very least, a better bet to replicate it than a lot of the teams have in this league, seeing as there's a lot of guys with like single A or lower experience that are going to be expected to perform this year. And I don't know if that's going to work out great. I mean, even on Southern Maryland, you have some NCAA guys that are going to be coming in here that are going to have to do some work here. And obviously they don't have as good of a bullpen. It doesn't look like Matt Latos is back. It doesn't look like Andres Brasino is going to be back anytime soon. I mean, Brasino's got an ERA of 1 in AAA so far this year. So, he's dominating on his own here. But there's a lot of guys, I think, on this Southern Maryland pitching staff that are really, really studs. And I'm going to be very curious to see how they do this year.
Yeah, I don't love the team overall. I agree. I think there's a lot of they're definitely a team that I think should be expected to regress on paper. However, I do on the pitching end of things, and of course, I mean, we could talk about Darryl Thompson until the sun goes down. Guy I did want to mention though as well that I'm really intrigued by is Andre Scrub. He's a guy who had some big league time with the Houston Astros. A guy who's, I mean, he is really good stuff. Has struggled with injuries over the last couple of seasons, and was kind of working his way back last year, so didn't really have a whole lot of time through in the Dominican Winter League as well. So I think Scrub is a guy that I look to in this bullpen. I'd be comfortable giving high leverage innings to out of the pen, and looking for, and it's so hard to replicate what they had with the Brasino Latos combo. Yeah. But I think Scrub, the problem is I think Scrub is a prototypical guy of show me you're healthy and then I'll pick you up. So could be something to watch for there, but I think he has the talent, and as a guy I'm intrigued by on the Southern Maryland pitching staff.
Certainly. I think last year you had obviously a couple of guys that were really solid starters, but you had a bullpen to back them up. I feel like this year is a year where we're really going to see the Crabs kind of lean on that starting pitching staff, where you see Thompson go out and do work, you see Cabrera go out and do work, you see Lamson go out and do work, and then the other guy, Alex Methrew, he's a guy that he had a good year last year. He started half the games he got into an 8-3 record. I know wins are a team stat, not a pitcher stat, but even still, an ERA below 4, which in the Atlantic League is something of note. Didn't really walk a lot of guys. He threw 106 innings, only walked 24 guys. So, I mean, that's pretty good. Yeah, he didn't strike out all that many, 73 in those 106 innings. But even still, overall, he did his job. And I'm going to be interested to see if he can't take that next step. And if he can, then you have a pretty solid 1, 2, 3, 4 coming in there. Now, of course, maybe you say, we need that bullpen help. He's going to be more of a bullpen pitcher as opposed to a starter. And that's certainly one way of taking it. But I think kind of leaning on that starting rotation is the way they're going to have to go about doing it this year. And obviously hoping that some of these other guys that didn't exactly have the best showings in the world at different levels kind of get it together and really pull down the fort in that bullpen.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think this is a team that will really look to lean on that starting pitching as well. And I think another team that as well that I'm interested in that sense is actually the Frederick Baseball Club. Question marks.
Whatever we want to call them this day.
Whatever works. And this Frederick team, I tell you, I like them on paper. I really do. Yeah. And I think when you have, I think the pitching staff in particular, there's a lot of guys that I like on here. I mean, you can't start anywhere, without talking about David Kubiak,
making his return.
Yeah, making his return to the Atlantic League as well. I mean, guys like Dustin Beggs have been in the have Atlantic League experience as well. But other guys two that I really like Villanueva, Jeff Johnson, both guys that pitched for Charleston and Lexington respectfully at some points. And another guy, Brett DeCuss, is former Major League Rule 5 pick. By the Texas Rangers. So,
Feigel's also another good guy in this too.
Right. I think there's a lot of depth in this pitching staff. Dovydas Neverauskas from former Pittsburgh Pirate had some big league time with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Pitched a little bit in Japan too. I think he's a guy that I'm looking forward to watching in here as well. And Max Povsey too is a guy that I've been high on that I've been high on in the past, and I know the numbers last year were pretty rough. But as he turned after he got turned into a reliever. So I don't know though. I think there's a lot of guys that really intrigue me on this pitching staff. And I mean, when you talk about major league veterans too, Stephen Brault is going to will be in this rotation as well. I mean Stephen Brault, he's was a solid pitcher for the Pirates for a while. Also sang the national anthem once or twice. Is a very good singer. Yeah, it is. I mean, so I think that when I look at pitching staffs and who I really like across the Atlantic League, I'd put Fredericks up there with anybody.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're even more of a well-rounded type of team because they have some really interesting names on the batting side too. But as far as their pitching concerned, Winston Lavender, he's a guy that I really like as well. One of the few bright spots from that Lexington, Team Kentucky type of setup there, which is why a guy like Nate Padan's also interesting to me too, because like they didn't really have good pitching teams over there in Kentucky last year. So maybe they turn it around here too. I really am interested in what Mark Minikasi's put together here with this whole team. Andrew Johnston, I think, is about the only pitcher we haven't named. And even him, he had a solid little outing the last time he truly had a healthy season. He looked pretty solid out of the bullpen. Now, I thought he was kind of done when he collapsed on the field after, I believe what was it? Was it his Achilles that went out when he was pitching for Southern Maryland, like a couple years back, like in 19, I think it was?
I don't remember, honestly.
Because I remember watching that game and he went down. I was like, I just hyped him up in the preview too. I was like, I thought he was going to have such a great year. And then he got injured after throwing like an inning, maybe 3 innings. It was a rough one. So I thought he was done, but he's back. And there's a lot of really good guys here. I'm not sure you mentioned Dustin Beggs, but he's another guy too. Overall, Frederick seems like the most, like their name, question mark team to me, where if it comes together, I really could see them being a really solid team here. And unlike a team like, say, Southern Maryland, where we're talking about them, okay, their pitching's going to have to carry them, especially the rotation. And then there's some guys, they're like, we didn't mention any of the batters, but like Braxton Lee's going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting as far as at the plate goes. And Jake Sundberg can get on base and then he can get from first to third pretty easily. But there's not a lot of big hitters in that lineup. Here, it seems like if you could just get 50% production out of both of them, there's certainly a lot of potential here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's whenever you're building a team from scratch, it becomes difficult. But I think that I like where Mark Minikasi. I think Minikasi's done a great job with this team. I'm excited to see them in action for sure.
Definitely. And one of the other teams that I think could deceptively be a really good pitching team and could even just be a good team in general is Staten Island. And if you hear me out on it, it's because last year they weren't a bad pitching team. You look at them, and of course they don't have guys like Matt Soltar anymore. They switched out Capion for Fuller in the bullpen there. But if you look at their pitching rankings overall, yeah, they let up 720 runs, but 100 of them were unearned. That's a lot of unearned runs. Like, they were a pretty good team. If you remember, we were watching this team. They were losing a lot of games in the beginning part of the year, but they were keeping games tight into the 6th, 7th, 8th inning. They just started to fall apart a little bit. They didn't have anything to back it up. And in the second half, they really recovered. They had a good second half, not great, but they were 30-36. That's not a bad second half. 6 games under 500 is not terrible. And if they didn't go 18-48 to open up the year, then they probably are in a much more interesting situation down the stretch here. And obviously there was other issues, the whole Kevin Krause situation, which we'll talk about him because he's back at Staten Island now. That team last year was not a terrible team. And a guy like, say, Anthony Rodriguez, I think could be a very solid player for them. Jim Fuller's a solid bullpen guy. Jordan Simpson has some potential there. I do like Eddie Reynoso, even though, he's been up and down certainly, but as far as a bullpen guy, I like him a lot. He threw a lot of innings. They seem to trust him. Now, obviously, new manager and Homer Bush in there, so maybe the trust level's a little bit different. Got to be earned back with a different guy, but he seems to be a pretty solid guy. McGowan is another guy, former major leaguer. He comes in too. There's a lot of pieces here on Staten Island that I think could very well be interesting. Even a guy like Williams Ramirez is a really good reliever. So I think that this is a team that's kind of sneaky deep. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other things that have to go right for them. You can't just win on pitching alone because pitching's only half the game. It only keeps the runs off the board. You still got to put runs on the board to win games. But sneaky, this could be a good sneaky pitching team. Now, there's things to add on to it, but that's kind of where I look at it at this point.
Interesting. And I see your point is certainly well taken. They're a much better team in the second half of the season. Staten Island was, and pitching wise, they weren't that bad throughout the year. Another arm I want to throw into the mix as well. I think Parker Bugg is due for a nice year as well. I mean, last year in AAA in the Marlins organization with the Jumbo Shrimp. 3.18 ERA and just under 40 innings pitched, and struck out more than a batter per inning. So I think he's a guy that perhaps just was one of the odd men out as far as just because he's 28 years old. I think he's a reliever that, or maybe they can even stretch him a little bit into a multi-inning reliever, maybe even a starter in indie ball. I don't know, but I think he's a guy that I'm excited for as well. And Alex Katz, you always love seeing Alex Katz around. He's always a reliable arm. Certainly has to cut down on the walk problems that he had last year. 22 walks in 24 innings isn't going to cut it. But he's a decent arm too. So I think your point's well taken that Staten Island could be much improved as far as much improved pitching wise this year.
Yeah, and even Pedro Bayano is another interesting name too. AAA guy, had success at that level last year. I just think that they could be that team. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, but I think it's worthy of note. But with that said, I do want to switch it over to some of the more well-rounded teams. We touched on them. In fact, we spent a little bit of time on Frederick as one of those teams that I view as a well-rounded team, but there's a few in there that I don't think really excel, like are definitively a pitching team or definitively a batting team, right? But there's some teams in here that are just really good at both of them, and I think Long Island and Frederick are the two kind of poster children for that.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I think especially I think on the Ducks end, because they've added a lot of they've added a lot of arms that I'm certainly that I'm really high on. I mean, Kyle Lobstein as well. A guy who pitching in Mexico last year. Jose. We love Jose on the show.
Fantastic reliever and 80 great name. Is.
Yeah, 80 great name, can't beat it. And certainly a guy that's going to be around. Al Albuquerque, a major league veteran. Yeah, Brett Kennedy.
I was just going to say, we named all these former major league guys and we just kind of glanced over Al Albuquerque. That's a really great addition. And on a lot of other teams, we'd be spending a lot of time on him. But with Long Island, they're just so deep in every regard and every facet that it's just like, oh yeah, Al Albuquerque's here too. By the way, Brett Kennedy's our opening day starter. He was a former major leaguer too. So
yeah, Brett Kennedy's a guy that I mean, he was picked up and was kind of a depth arm in the Red Sox organization last year. So like in Double A, I believe. So Kennedy is one of the better, I think, rock solid aces that you can have on this team. So I think Long Island. When you talk about teams that are well rounded, Joe Iorio certainly has been very consistent for a while. Even a guy like Matt Vogel, I think Matt Vogel's an interesting piece just because the ERA is bad. It was bad last year. The walks and strikeouts were not. I think there could be some progression made in that way. I mean, 38 strikeouts in 28 innings. I'm already intrigued right off the bat. So I think there's a team with a lot of pitching and they usually have a lot of pitching to start the year, but I think last year was a matter of replacing those arms that they struggled with. But hey, to start off the year, the Ducks, as they always are, are a well-rounded squad.
Yeah, I mean, really the three Joes are really what's interesting here. With the Joe Kuza, a really good bullpen guy. We saw it with Staten Island. He threw a lot of innings and maintained a low ERA on a team that really wasn't doing any pitcher any favors. Then Joe Iorio, you mentioned, he's been a very reliable Duck arm for a very long time. And he just feels like the next in the line of guys that winds up being a Duck for essentially their whole career and racking up a lot of numbers. He seems like the next guy like that. And then Joe DiCarlo, a guy we mentioned a little bit earlier as a solid behind the plate guy. If you're running a tandem behind the plate of Joe DiCarlo, because he's not going to be getting any third base time with the kind of infield the Ducks have, and Anthony Perrone, that's a really good looking duo there behind home plate. I mean, you got a lot of options and a lot of roster versatility here, a lot of lineup versatility for Wally Backman to play with. I mean, you got like 6 different starting caliber infielders. You have like 4 different really good outfielders, 2 good catchers, a stacked bullpen. I mean, starting pitching is really the only area where I'm kind of so-so on. And, you know, even that, I mean, if you're good everywhere else, you can survive the starting pitching.
Yeah, and with the depth of the bullpen that they have, you don't necessarily need your starters to get into the seventh inning to be successful the way a team like Southern Maryland might have to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a squad that's gonna be up there, and I think it's due for a bounce back year.
Definitely. They're definitely one of those teams I look at. Frederick's the other team I immediately comes to mind. We talked about them in a little bit of depth here on the pitching side of things with all the guys they have there. But even on a batting perspective, they have some really talented guys. Craig DiDillo is a guy that I really look at and I'm like, I like everything I see about him. Like the batting average is whatever, but he provides a lot of power. He provides runs, decent amount of walks. Yeah, I don't love the fact he struck out over 200 times last year. I'm not loving that. But, you know, I still like him a lot as a player, certainly. Gavin Johns is another guy in that grouping of just had a very solid season last year. Really like him there. Jimmy Paredes, Johnny Turbo, fantastic name as always. Johnny Turbo, always got to mention him. You know, these are 2 solid guys as well. You can keep going down the list of guys. I won't take them all, but I mean, I gotta mention Sterling Castro, a guy that was a major league all-star, a top, shortstop for a little bit of time there. He's on board, even if it's not the same Sterling Castro, still a guy worthy of note. And naturally, Scott Kelly continues to, speed run his Atlantic League career by never missing a single year.
Never. Not missing a game. Just, and even a guy like Rowdy Reed too.
Yeah.
He's got quite a lot of power and an 18 home run hitter last year in the minor leagues. The only problem is he's not really a factor defensively, which is, I assume, what dragged his value down and why he's here. But I mean, man, can he pulverize baseballs? So, Rowdy Reed, certainly a guy I'm very interested to see, in Frederick as well. But, I think, yeah, Frederick is a team that I think is extremely well-rounded. And we touched on their pitchers earlier, but, even a guy like Cole Cottom, like a minor league depth catcher in the Red Sox organization, for a number of years as well. So, certainly a good looking squad.
Oh yeah. And see, like the only thing that gives me pause with this is we've seen the first year teams before, right? But yeah. Mark Minikazi has experience in this league. as a player, as a manager. This is his third year in his third team, obviously, all for very different reasons. But, it's still a first year team. And I can never tell what to make of that because it always can go so many different ways, especially just from the matter of refilling your roster, right? And, Frederick's new to the whole independent ball scene. I don't know how the ballpark's going to play. I don't know some factors here, but as far as new teams go, they're like the oldest new team, if that makes sense. They got a lot of really talented ball players here, but there's just something that hangs me up about, first year team. It spooks me, even if it doesn't really make sense on paper.
I mean, the only team that's been able to do it, it was High Point.
Well, Lexington also.
True, Lexington, yeah. But even Lexington, though, even though their second half wasn't good.
Oh yeah, no, that's bad.
So they had their struggles before, of course, getting hot and winning the championship. Yeah. So, I think I think Minakazi really helps there though, just because he's done this before. He's done this exact situation before. So, but I think Minakazi's done a great job assembling a team on paper that looks like a title threat.
It certainly does. And I'm not really sure if I can find too many other teams that really kind of fit in that well-rounded grouping. Like maybe a High Point. Would you consider High Point?
I would. I think High Point is they have a lot of Atlantic League veterans in their pitching staff, guys like Liam O'Sullivan, Bryce Hensley, Craig Stem, in that starting rotation. They've got some nice bullpen arms, Jonathan Crawford, as well, that has also pitched in the American Association for a bit. I mean, Mitch Atkins too. I think there's a decent amount of arms here that I like and that I'm high on. I think Ryan Dull, former Oakland A arm as well, that has some Atlantic League time too. So I'd put High Point in that well-rounded category.
Yeah, like I also want to point out DJ Burt too, another solid player on that front. Are we still expecting anything out of Liam O'Sullivan? Because he was good in Somerset, and then it just never seemed to really pan out elsewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, last year's not. He definitely struggled last year. He was always a pitch to contact guy, so those guys, I guess, are a bit more volatile than others.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, you could make that argument. I think regardless, though, I think there's a lot of there's arms like Stem and Atkins and guys like
Mickey
that.
Janis too, to a certain extent.
Brandon Lee Brandt too is a guy I really like in the former Philly prospect too, as a left-handed starter. I think Lee Brandt could be quite a good fit in this league, especially because he's a guy that in 69 and a third innings only walked 16 with 68 punch outs. It's a good ratio right there. So I think Lee Brandt's a guy I'm excited for in this High Point rotation.
Yeah, no, he's definitely one of those guys too. Remember when he was going to be in the league a couple years back, and then he got signed like right around opening day before he even got a chance to pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I remember watching him pitch in the All-American Baseball Challenge during the pandemic.
Oh, God, I remember that. Did someone, I think it's Jesse Russo, who's on Long Island, that the last real meaningful baseball he played was that All-American Baseball Challenge. Like, I saw that pop up. I was like, wait, what? Yeah. It kind of took me by surprise, but.
What a time that was.
I know, it was crazy there. But yeah, High Point definitely is I think really the only other team that really could be said for well-rounded. Do you think there's a case for Gastonia too, or is that really stretching it here? Because, I mean, they have some good pitching. I will say that. Like, I like Van Steensel. I love Matt Hall. Marcus Walden's a solid player too. But I look elsewhere. Santa B is good, but, everyone else, I don't really know what to expect from them.
I don't love Gastonia's pitching either. I don't mind a guy like Sal Romano too. Yeah. The guy who's got some big league time there as well. As far as Matt Hall in the transaction log, it has him as released as of
they got rid of him. Oh, okay.
So
see, this is what Yeah.
He could get picked up. I don't know. Maybe he got picked up, and we just don't know.
Could very well be. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me either because they made a point of acquiring him from KC. And I remember seeing, I was like, oh, okay, that's a big name.
Yeah, they probably let him go to go get some more money elsewhere. That's what I'm thinking.
Definitely could be a case there. Maybe it's a contract purchase. We don't know. Or does the Atlantic League do the thing where they actually list a contract purchase?
That'd be really cool.
Yeah. And wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, the dude balled out last year. So, I mean, you take him away from this team, you know, it starts to get a little bit more sketchy. I mean, like, Gunnar Kynes is a guy that I wanted to see succeed for a very long time. And I just am starting to get to the point where I'm giving up some hope on him because, like, I don't know if it's going to happen.
It just seems like to me with Kynes that he's never been able to make the jump.
Yeah.
Is that a fair statement?
I think it is. Like, he gets right up to the edge of it. Because you look at his numbers and it's like, okay, 128 strikeouts to 28 walks. I love that. And then it's just like, okay, but you didn't do it. You didn't finish it. Like, every time he looks like, okay, this is the year, it's not the year. Because he goes up and then he gets killed.
It's like, yeah, he's obviously had some really great years in the Frontier League and stuff, but you're right. He hasn't had it yet until he shows at this level. I think there should be some cautious optimism with him.
Yeah, I mean, like, on the batting side, we already went over like the talent that's there. It's a very deep batting team. Even guys like Cole Freeman that I don't think we really mentioned all too much. He's a solid player as well. But I mean, like, I'm short of saying they're a well-rounded team. It feels like the bats are what's going to get them through.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. But there's teams that we haven't talked about, teams that either we just don't know what to make of, or they're just not definitively a batting team or a well-rounded team or a good pitching team. And I feel like that starts over in Charleston, right? Like, there's guys like Daniel Brito. I like him. I love Danny Rachanski. I always have. I think he's a solid player. Austin Henrich is another good player. But man, I don't see much else here. Like, I want to
Dennis
really
Phipps can swing it.
Oh yeah, Dennis. I forgot he's on this team. Dennis Phipps is a solid player on this team. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Charleston also put out their opening day roster too. So if you want to do a little bit more of a deep dive on this team, while I go ahead and try to find that roster real quick, we can.
Sure, I think there's some intriguing pieces in this lineup. Honestly, in my view. Bobby Bradley's a guy former Cleveland farmhand who was highly thought of at one point, has not really panned out. Dawel Lugo as well in the Tigers system was good for a little bit, but hey, I mean not to mention Telvin Nash is on this team.
I saw he was listed on the roster I found, or at least under guys that they took that were supposedly could be one of them. I don't know if it is. I'm trying to find this opening day roster.
I mean, if did they make a big deal about it when they signed him?
I don't think they did. I don't think they did. In case anyone was wondering where I got these rosters from, by the way, Ryan helped us out with this. So
yeah,
blame him if any of these things are wrong. I'm trying to dodge some heat, so.
I know, but I mean, there's other guys I like a lot. Like I love Warchansky. I think Warchansky getting an opportunity in the Atlantic League is overdue, and
definitely he's
something that I like on that end. But there's even other arms like Eddie Butler who's been around for a little bit. Still, he's been just kind of okay since being a consistent starter in getting starting innings in the Atlantic League. So I don't know if I love the pitching. I don't mind the lineup, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I think the pitching is what concerns me for Charleston. And not that I think they're a bad team, but I think in the juggernaut that is the Southern Division of the Atlantic League, I don't know if they match up.
Yeah, they're just not good enough to really contend for a long time. I just think they're a very shallow team. Found the opening day rosters on the Instagram, not the Twitter. So it would appear as though the pitchers are Mikey York, Joe Testa, Kit Sheets, Austin Henrich, Troy Bacon, Derek Adams, Danny Rachanski, Eddie Butler, Ricardo Gomez, Williams Jerez, Ryan Clark, Jacob Bosikovic, and Colt Webb. Zachary Bridges and Mitch Gelfie as catchers, Diego Gorez, Luis Itiles, Luis Roman, Daniel Brito, DeWall Lugo, Montreal Marshall, Bobby Bradley as infielders, outfielders, Yuffie Perez, Jose Bermudez, Dwight Smith Jr., Terry Fuller, no Telvin Nash. So he may have been there at one point and then dipped.
Yeah.
I don't know. And other fun news from Flow Sports Land, it would appear as though the Gastonia broadcast has no audio.
You gotta be shitting me.
No. If anyone that wants to go and check out Indie Ball Nation, our friend Ryan's Twitter, he's given updates on this. Apparently at first pitch, there was no audio. Yeah. Let's see who else is, let's see. First Atlantic League home run season was missed by Flow Sports broadcast. Instead, we got to watch the catcher ask for a new ball. Yep.
That's what I come here. That's what I pay $30 a month for. I want to see the catcher and get a new ball.
Oh God, this is apparently, because Ryan's flaming him on Twitter right now. I know this is fascinating audio to listen to, but we haven't really had the chance to dunk on Flow. We're going to take the opportunity to do so. Apparently there was ballpark audio, but there was no broadcast audio.
Yeah.
This is
interesting.
Yeah. Oh my God. This is fantastic. They can hear the in-game music, but they can't actually hear the broadcasters.
Yeah. They sound like the Rockers and the Ducks are doing well, but I guess that's not a surprise.
Yeah, exactly. And apparently the attendance in Lexington is scarce.
Whoa.
We'll go scarce for now. But so that's the check-in on the lifetime feed on that. I'm sure everyone will have fun running over to Twitter to go ahead and watch those things here. But yeah, as far as the roster we know of from Charleston there, I'm not really thoroughly impressed by any of it, to be quite honest with you. I think there's some potential here, but overall, I got a lot of doubt about it. Eddie Butler may be interesting though. I could see him having a bounce back year.
Yeah, I could. I could. I think he has the experience. He's pitched in the big leagues too. So, I could see that as well. I don't know. I don't think there's enough to compete in this division. And another team that I feel that way for, quite strongly. Do you have any idea where I could be going with this one, Nick?
I think we just mentioned their attendance struggles, if I had to hazard a guess.
The Lexington Counterclocks.
Which, can I just say real quick here? In the Frederick article, it literally said, the Frederick Ball Club, they're going to have their opening day game May 2nd against the Lexington Counterclocks. And reading that in a print sentence really bugged me, because I was like, this should not be a professional team name. If you're finding out about this Atlantic League club for the first time that's just getting added, I want you to know that the Frederick fans' first experience of going, independent league baseball, let's see what this is about, is, ooh, we have a home game against the Counterclocks, and there's no audio on the one broadcast. I want that to be known right now. That's what the reality is for first-time Frederick fans. And I gotta imagine management is not thrilled at that reality.
Look, I just don't see a whole lot of talent on this team. I think if a full season of Jesus Tavares maybe changes that as well. But look, Jared Eichhoff is certainly a big name at the top of that rotation. But I don't know. I mean, a guy like Thomas Dillard, I think, could have a good year. Got on base at a 364 clip despite the 233 batting average last year in Double-A with 12 home runs. Could potentially turn into something there. Abiato Avelino was a former Yankee prospect who I liked quite a bit, but has kind of fallen off a little bit. So we'll see if he can rejuvenate things. But I mean, other than that, on this Lexington team, to be honest with you, Nick, I don't see much. I don't see much of any reason to expect them to compete with the big dogs in this Southern Division. And I don't know. It's just. They look rough.
Yeah, like Pat Ledette, I think is interesting. Like at first I had said, like when Ryan posted this roster a couple of days ago, he posted on Twitter, I was like, oh, it can't be that bad. And I started looking, I was like, okay, actually, once I started doing the stats, I was like, oh, okay, wait, actually, hold on a minute. Sam Burton's all right. Eichhoff, you mentioned, solid. Ledette, I think, could be interesting. But yeah, from just a sheer talent perspective, I'm not really seeing much here. JC Encarnacion is kind of interesting to me, and I do like Connor Owings. I think he's a solid player. Granted, his highest level is single A, but I think there's something to be said about him. I think he can maybe make that transition. But yeah, outside of that, it's just very scarce as far as talent goes here. And I'm not loving it.
Yeah, I agree. And to flip into the North Division, we kind of mentioned, I'll just touch on it briefly with Southern Maryland. I think the lineup is I'm expecting the lineup to struggle a little bit. From what they were last year, is the team that I think is going to have to rely on their pitching, just because I think in their lineup, I think the men, I know I talked about it a little bit before, I think Mendoza could really help them out as well. So, no. Hold on. Mendoza's not on Southern Maryland. I'm mixing with York. I'm an idiot. Okay.
I mean, point still remains for York.
Start over. So Southern Maryland, I think in their lineup, there's not a lot of pieces that I love. I mean, look, you're signing guys from NAIA ball, I don't know, and a lot of Pioneer League flyers too. Here I'm seeing 5 games here, 20 games there. I'm not a big fan of the Casey Hobson profile. I just think there's a lot of swing and miss. And I don't know if he hits for the power that is necessary to offset that kind of thing. I like Braxton Lee. I think Braxton Lee is pretty good. I'd put him at the top of the lineup, but I'm kind of worried about them lineup wise. And another team that I don't really know what to make of, and it's kind of odd a little
Defending
bit. Defending champion. They just won the championship.
Yeah, I was about to say, we haven't mentioned them yet.
I don't really know, I guess, what to make of them. I think there's some pieces in the lineup that I like. Kelly Dugan is obviously fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's the guy. He is going to be the guy for them. Trayvon Robinson, is always good, in that lineup too. I wish there was more power in this lineup outside of you guys like Dugan and Robinson, and even Mercedes and Robinson. Yeah. Melvin Mercedes and Robinson aren't really power guys. So I just think you kind of want to lean in. You kind of want to lean into that with your. Yeah, I mean, want to lean into that with the Barnstormers, and I don't know. I haven't really seen it with them with this roster on paper.
They got a Pecos League guy here. I mean, we got Pecos Leaguers. We got guys that's only meaningful action was like winter ball. We got a lot going on here. I mean, like Ariel.
We got a lot going on.
Yeah, like Ariel Sandoval could be interesting. He was all right for them last year, as well as with Sussex. You combine the two numbers, they look pretty good, But Chris Proctor could be interesting too. I think he's an interesting guy. I think there's some potential here. Donald Goodson throws the ball really, really, really hard, so that's kind of cool. But you look across the board at the pitching, and it's like, what, we got 2-3 guys that can pitch? Really? I
don't know.
Niles Ball's interesting.
Sabatino was really not good last year.
Yeah.
Jared Lockend, maybe.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy there. I mean, do you think Sittinger has a rebound in him?
Potentially. I think they're going to need him.
Rick Clark's a guy too.
Yeah, I think overall I'm not a huge fan of this pitching staff, and that's what kind of holds me back. And I don't know. I think they could be due it for some regression.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you think about it too, because they just got hot in the second half, and so I'm always weary of teams like, you won a championship, we can't take that away from you. And in the moment, when you're a hot team, it doesn't really matter what your flaws are as a team, right? What matters is that you're winning games, and at the end of the day, that's why you take the field. You play to win the game, as Herm Edwards would say. And they won. So who cares what the end result is, right? As long as you walk away with a championship, it masks all the holes here. But coming into a year, you don't want to be in this situation where it's like, okay, well, if they get hot, that's not the way you want to walk into the year here. You want to walk in like Long Island. You want to walk in like High Point. You want to walk in even like Gastonia here, where it's like, okay, their pathway to victory is kind of clear. We could see how they're going to win. You walk in like this, it's not saying they're not going to win. It's just you don't really have a clear pathway on them, you know?
Yeah, I would definitely, I definitely agree with that with them.
Exactly, yeah. And even like York's almost in that same grouping here, where it's just like, there's some guys here. I like Hull. I like all the guys that we mentioned, with the batting previously. The pitching's a little, touch and go here. And I think they're going to rely on some guys with lesser experience to have to really do some heavy lifting too. But I think there's guys here. Tasker Strobel, I love as a pitcher. I think he's a really solid guy. And I think a Tasker Strobel, Victor Capion bullpen is a very interesting bullpen to run. I think those are two guys that are very, very good at the back end, and if you can get to the point where they're going to be getting some meaningful reps, then we're going to be having a fun year. And I like Rick Forney as a manager a lot too. And I think that kind of new injection to York could be good for them. But again, outside of the guys we mentioned by name, there's like not terribly much here. So they're kind of in that mushy middle grouping where it feels like Long Island's the king in the north. And then there's a bunch of other guys that are going to have a scramble in the second half. And I almost wonder if that's kind of the plan for some of these guys, is to kind of like wait and see the first half, see how it's going to go, and then the second half's where we make our run.
Maybe. I mean, on the York side of things, to be honest with you, Nick, I actually kind of like them.
Yeah.
I think their pitching staff is better than they've had in a while. I think two guys that I like in particular, Blake Rogers and Carlos Espinal, guys that were in the upper level minors last year. You mentioned Tasker Strobel, as well, and Victor Capion, in the closer role, I think is an excellent role too. And I look at also a guy like Melvin Correa, who was outstanding in I believe, I think like high A ball.
Yeah. High A double A last year.
So, it's interesting that he's here. I think this pitching staff's underrated, and I'm a big York Revolution believer coming into this year. And like I'd certainly put them ahead of the Barnstormers right now. That's my opinion. But
certainly interesting. And I guess on that note, I want to take to that kind of like new area that we're going to do here with each team. So that way each team gets mentioned here. I think we mentioned them all already, but to kind of go back to that pathway to winning question, have one kind of, I guess, burning question about each team, about their season. When you look at the team as a whole here, you have a preference on a division you want to take this, or?
Oh, well, I'll take the North. I'll answer the North, and you'll answer the South. What do you think about that?
That works for me. So I'm asking.
See how it goes.
Yeah. So if you want to kick it off, whatever team you want to start with, and just run through that line.
Okay. I'll kick it off with, as far as the South. I'll kick it off with I'll kick it off with Gastonia.
Okay.
Actually. Gastonia, last year, obviously it's been well documented how they were offensively and of course stealing bases, and such. They also had the best team ERA in the Atlantic League last year. So do you think in order to win one of the half championships, Gastonia has to be in the top 3 in pitchers in combined ERA?
It's kind of a weird turn of events. So we went from the Gastonia ERA check as look how bad they are to a complete 180 and look, they're first place there. As far as having the ERA as a team, it really comes down to, are they going to be able to run as effectively, if not more effectively, because of the way the pitching rules are set up now? And is the offense good enough? I look at their team and I feel like they can get away without having that top tier ERA, because I think they are a talented batting team. And I feel like at least in the regular season, you can outscore your problem. I think when we start getting into, you have to win 3 of 5, you have to win 2 of 3, I think that's when the ERA starts to come around. But by the time we reach it, where that kind of a situation exists, this roster could be so different. So I'd say no, they don't have to have that kind of, top 2 or 3 team ERA to be successful this year.
Okay. I think, I'd probably agree with that too. I think that, at least probably don't have to be elite, but of course
you still have to be serviceable. Yeah, you still have to be
pitching.
good. Like you can't have what Lexington had last year.
Yeah,
they have that kind of pitching, they're going to get killed.
Yeah, flipping over to their rival though, with High Point, I take that. At least when you talked about them, you're not loving their pitching staff. So what do you see? What do you need to see from their pitching staff in order? What does their pitching staff need to do in order to really put High Point in the mix for a title contention?
I'd say just be consistent. Honestly, that's the thing I look at. Like I see there's a lot of potential, like Atkins, Mickey Janis, Ryan Dull. I like a lot. There's guys there that I do like, but Craig Stem's another guy. But overall, it's just, I don't know how much, that staff's going to be kept together this year. I think we could definitely see guys like Lee Brandt get picked up. I think you could see some guys like that go. I just need to see that, okay, they're going to be, a good team throughout. That they're not just going to have one or two guys carrying the load. You look at their pitching stats last year, they were pretty middle of the road, fourth, third, or fifth in pretty much all categories, except for strikeouts. They didn't really strike anybody out, ninth in that. But if they can go ahead and do what they did last year, be as good as last year, then I like them a lot. I think then that's a really solid team. So I just need consistency out of them more than anything else. That, and also I want to see what the starting pitching looks like too. I think the bullpen element of like a Hensley there and some other guys could very well be, all you need. But I need to just see that either one element of your pitching is elite or that you're just consistent throughout.
Okay, fair enough. I think now for the new team, the Frederick to be determines. Do you think that they are the team to beat in the South Division?
That's a tough question because I could very well see them being that. At the same point in time, though, I have my hesitancy about first year teams. And I think on paper, they're probably the most solid, not the best, but the most solid team here. That being said, I still like Gastonia slightly more. I like High Point more. I don't think they're the team to beat, but I think that fight for the top of the division is going to be very interesting. And I think Frederick's involved in that for a long time. I'm just going to be very interested to see how that ballpark plays, and B, how good are they at replacing guys that get picked up? Because I think they're going to have a lot of guys picked up.
Interesting. Okay, and that's of course is always the
eternal struggle.
Yes. So for the Charleston Dirty Birds, a team that we're both not super high on. However, Dennis Phipps being back into the Atlantic League intrigues me. So I guess, is there a specific part of that roster you think that needs to really outperform expectations in order for them to be in the mix for a playoff spot?
I mean, honestly, I just don't think it's a great roster altogether. So I think that one side or the other has to take charge here. I think the batting probably has a better chance of outperforming it. So I'm going to say that because I like Brito, I like Lugo, I like Phipps. I like these guys, although I don't remember, was he listed on that final roster when we ran through it? Because I don't remember saying his name.
Which one?
Phipps on the Charleston roster.
He's on here.
He is? Okay, yeah. Because I don't remember. Are you looking at the one they posted online today?
Oh, no, I was looking at just the stat page.
Okay. But yeah, I think honestly, offensively with Lugo and Brito, they have a better chance at outperforming batting wise. Maybe a guy like Bobby Bradley who played high level and didn't do great last year. Maybe he could really do well on this level. I think there's potential there as a whole that they could kind of outscore their problem. I still don't expect it. Just because pitching wise, I think there's 3 or 4 guys and that's about it. So yeah, I would say the batting.
Okay. And finally, with the Lexington Counterclocks, I'm trying to find a way to phrase this. For Lexington,
playing in front of 2,000 people is a success for them this year. Yes.
Yeah. Is there any path to them, being a potential playoff team? I guess.
Ooh, cool. I get to give my hot take answer that will come back to bite me in the ass in September. No, there isn't. I honestly don't see that is. And it's pretty straightforward there. It's not even that I have anything against the team personally. It's just, I look at that roster and I don't see the pathway forward for them, right? Like, I see High Point. I see Gastonia. I see Frederick. I can even, in a way, I don't think it'll happen, but I could see a way where, okay, Testa and Rachansky lead a great 1-2 punch at the top of a rotation that essentially guarantees you 2 wins every time through the rotation, and the other 3 guys, they combine to get 1 win through per, and the offense really does well. Like, I can come up with an ideal situation where they get a playoff spot, they get into a wild card fight. I can't see that with Lexington. I just think there's so much going on there and so little talent on that roster that I just can't see it. And not to say that there's no talent there. I think there's certainly some good players there. Eichhoff certainly on that list. I'm really big on Connor Owings. I think he can do really well. I think there's some guys. I think you mentioned Tavares earlier. I think there's guys here. Sam Burton's another guy I do like. I think he could really perform well. He didn't do great last year, but I think he can be a good pitcher still, but overall, there's just such a wasteland on this team that I just can't see any way they make the postseason.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
South Division. So I guess flipping over to the North, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. So flipping it over here, I'm going to open it up in Staten Island because I find this to be one of the most interesting teams here. And it's a team that I think could go either way here. They have some real good talent here, and they've also showed us a little glimpse of what they can be last year. So what do they have to do in 23 to prove that second half in 22 was more closer to what they actually are? So, are they going to have to be a better batting team? Are they going to have to be a better pitching team? What do they have to do in 23 to prove that last year's second half wasn't a fluke?
Well, I think it all revolves around them offensively, and they have to get way, way, way better offensively. And I don't know if I see a big path to that on this roster offensively. I don't mind Adrian Sanchez, a former big leaguer with the Nationals. I think the addition of David Romero is by far the most interesting add on this team. I think, of course, with Krause in the mix for that as well after his interesting stint last year.
Oh, yeah.
So I think Romero and Krause are your 2 big guns in the lineup. Ricardo Cespedes was solid last year too. So with him in the fold, I think that makes it interesting. But I think in order for them to show that their second half signs of life were not a fluke, I think offensively, in particular, I think where they gotta get better is offensively. They really need to improve there.
You think Zach Rakusin helps with that?
Yeah, but I think he helps, but I don't know.
And Aguilar wasn't bad either.
Good. I don't know I think he's a good guy to have in the lineup, like more towards the bottom.
Yeah, like a 7-8 hitter.
When he's your 3rd or 4th best hitter on the roster, I don't know if that's great for an Atlantic League roster.
Fair point. I mean, Aguilar's not bad either, too. But, admittedly, he's also not a big time guy. So, on that note, I'm going to switch it over to, do you see anyone on the offensive side for Southern Maryland really kind of having a breakout year? A guy that we didn't really talk too much about, because we mentioned as far as the batting goes for this team, there's a lot of guys that had, a dozen games in the Pioneer League, or they're coming right from college, NAIA ball, or the United Shore Professional League, guys like that. I think there may even be a Pecos League around here somewhere. I know a couple of rosters have them, but is there any guy from an offensive perspective you see kind of jumping out at you to have a breakout year?
I think as far as there's not a lot. I think the one guy that I'd be really intrigued to watch on the offensive side of the ball on this Southern Maryland side is Jack Sundberg, because last year of course, in the Atlantic League, 45 stolen bases. Now with the new only one disengagement rule, you'd have to think that when he gets on, he's going to try and run. He's going to try and steal second. He's going to try and steal third. So I think he is going to be the most exciting player in this Blue Crab lineup. And so as far as I don't know if I see a whole lot of breakout candidates on this team, but I think a guy like Sundberg, if he gets on base at a 374 clip again, can make a really big impact for them, even though he doesn't hit for a ton of power.
Okay. I definitely can see that. I was thinking maybe like a Ryan Hogg could also be that.
Yeah.
But
so I think he'd be the next best example. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely interesting there. I'm going to shift it more to Pennsylvania now, and go to York here, and going kind of in a similar realm here where they have a lot of guys that maybe are recognizable here, but obviously as a whole, the York team hasn't been great historically. Do you think Rick Forney coming in, bringing some of his guys, bringing maybe a new mentality is what's going to take here to get York to improve? Basically, the question is, what's the Rick Forney impact going to be on the York Revolution this year?
Nick, I'm so glad you asked the question, because I think it's going to be significant.
Hmm.
I think it's going to be a big time change in how this roster is built. I think there's more athleticism on this team. I think there's more contact. I think the pitching is better. I love this York Revolution team, and there's some returners that have come back that are good, that have the power, like Nelly Rodriguez. I've mentioned that I think Drew Mendoza is an interesting piece too, and I think the pitching is really improved across the board. So I honestly think, and of course Tomo Odasaka, I cannot wait to watch in this York lineup as well. So I think the Rick Forney impact is going to be a lot. I think it's going to be a ton, and I really, really like York this year. So I'm
enough to get him over the top. At least I shouldn't say to get him over the top in the sense of getting to the final, but enough to make it a competitive first round playoff series. Are they a playoff team because of him?
I have them in my championship series.
Oh yeah,
I do.
Oh, and let's see. That's going to be real fun when we get to that in just a second. But I got two more to go through here, and it's a shame you're not going to be able to watch this team without Flow Sports. So, and even then, you may not have audio. So that's the price of doing business in the Atlantic League: $150 and no audio. That costs extra. Going to the other team in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster, they're coming off of a very good year, a championship year, their first in nearly a decade. And, they only really have because of that hot second half here. We've already said that this is a team that really is a coin flip kind of team. You could see them going one way or the other. Is there any one player that is the key to that team being a playoff team again, or being a team that's going to be finishing at the bottom of their division?
I lean more towards the bottom, and I think they can prove me wrong. They have the ability to prove me wrong, possibly. But I don't know. I just don't love this roster. I mean, I think obviously Dugan is incredible. I think the run of 26 home runs in 62 games, I don't know if that can be topped for quite a while. So I think that I think there are pieces here in the lineup. Travis Lakins in the pitching staff is a guy that I'm also interested to watch. I know the numbers were ugly, but I think that he's a guy that intrigues me too. So I just don't know if I like the pitching, so I lean more towards bottom of the division.
I mean, like a Joseph Carpenter too, of limited sample size, but he did decent in his debut there. And I mean, like, is there any player that really could change that, could take them from a bottom team to a top team if they were to, shoot out? Obviously, Dugan was on an MVP level pace. Maybe he doesn't catch Hawkins. Maybe he does if he stays healthy. But, is there any player that could really kind of change that?
I think guys like Trayvon Robinson could really play a role in that. I think Carpenter, as well, but I think my concerns for them rely a lot more on the pitching side of things, and I think they're gonna need a bounce back season from a guy like Dom DeSabatino, and guys like that. So that's more what I'm looking for from them.
Definitely. And so then the last one is obviously the star-studded Long Island Ducks team. They seemingly are impregnable at every turn. They got a good pitching staff. They have a good defensive team. They have a good offensive team. Obviously, they are on paper the favorite to go the distance here. But is there a weak spot on this team? And if there is, where is it?
I think it's their lack of power.
Yeah.
And it's something that I didn't love about their team last year. I think there's some good pieces. I don't know if there's a lot of power, and I think they're reliant on stringing 3-4 hits together, which is not a bad thing because that's certainly, how some teams win, and stuff like that. But I think that the lack of power, I think, in the lineup is the one thing that sticks out to me. It's a potential issue. I don't know if it will be an issue, but that's the thing that would concern me about this Ducks roster.
Okay, certainly. So, I mean, that answers all the burning questions there. So I could definitely see power being a problem for this team too. So be interesting to see how that goes. And so it wouldn't be a preview show if we didn't get to predictions. So I suppose we should just get to that. The two playoff teams and then the championship matchup and winner, if you would.
So, two playoff teams coming out of the North. Kind of spoiled it already. I got York, Long Island, and York coming out of the North Division, both making the postseason. Although I think Long Island could be the better team on paper, I think it's York's year. Okay. And not the better team on paper doesn't always win in the playoffs. So I have York going to the championship series from the North. We'll see. I'm fully aware that that could potentially blow up epically in my face, but we're gonna try it anyway. And in the South, to be honest, I think there's a lot of parity, a lot of teams that I could go with. I'm gonna go with Gastonia and Frederick as the two teams that would make it. I think High Point's a good team and a good squad, but I would leave them just out between those two teams. And in a playoff series, it could really go either way between Gastonia and Frederick. I'll go with Frederick because at least with the team now that I really like their pitching. Okay. And so that's where I would, and fully aware that the rosters could change, but just judging by what's on paper, I have Frederick and York in the finals. And is it the year that the York Revolution get over the hump? No, I'm going to go Frederick.
Going Frederick.
I think I'm going to say a second time in the last 3 years that a team in their first year in the Atlantic League wins the championship. Yeah, I'm going to take Frederick and Mark Minikowski.
It's interesting. You have a champion that I don't even think is making the postseason. That's what's fun about this.
We haven't had that in a while for our preview shows.
I know. Normally we're locked up because, in fairness, if you look at the American Association, it's like, okay, we have a clear-cut 4 best teams here. And typically speaking, on paper, it's pretty clear-cut here. But yeah, it's interesting how this goes. Honestly, where I'm kind of at here is I could see Long Island winning both halves. I'm really high on them. Maybe I'm buying into the hype. Maybe I'm buying into the on paper a little too much. But I just think that they're a better team and that everyone else in the North, the other 4 teams, are all just kind of the same. The kind of agitator in me kind of wants to take Staten Island because I do like their roster construction. I think Homer Bush is going to take this team and do a lot with it. I don't think we talked enough about how bringing Krause back in, having a different manager, how that's going to affect it. But in the end, I think it's literally Long Island coming out of the North. I don't think there's any other team that's better than they are. Even if Long Island loses pieces, even if Long Island takes their foot off the gas in the second half, I just don't see that, being the case there. And so that means we have to have a wild card, of course. And if we're getting a wild card, Frederick does make sense for me to take that spot, but I just don't know why. I feel like something's going to happen, and we always have that one team that comes out of nowhere, right? That just takes something up. Like last year, we wouldn't have expected Lancaster to make the postseason, but they did, and then they won everything. So High Point Gastonia seems like an easy 1-2 there. You want to say Frederick. I don't think Lexington's making it. Charleston, then by default, is the other team. And I feel like they're the kind of roster that I just spent a lot of time saying, they're not really that good of a team. They really shouldn't do well. That then just gets really hot and just kind of comes out of nowhere and wins a half for no goddamn reason whatsoever. You know, so I'm going to say they're going to make it. I have no real justification for it. I have no real basis for it. On paper, you're absolutely right. Frederick's a better team. They should beat them 9 times out of 10. But I just have a feeling about it. Now, I don't think they're going anywhere once they get there. Let's get that straight. You know, I think it's going to be Long Island coming out of a wild card matchup there because I think they are just a better team. But that said, I feel like this is the year High Point gets it done. I don't know why. I like their team. I like their construction here. Yeah, I wasn't sold on their pitching staff, but I really, really, really like their batting. I think in a playoff series, they're better than Gastonia. And I think in a playoff series, when it comes down to getting that timely hit, the hit that matters, I feel like they get it done there. I feel like it's High Point over Long Island this year. And I may not have much of a basis for it, but it just feels like that's the way it's going to happen. I feel like we always have one oddity every year in the Atlantic League. And I feel like that's it this year.
I love it. There you have it.
So that's our prediction. That's our preview. That's our rundown. Do we have any other final points or any wrap-up thoughts before we wrap up the show for the week?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all.
All right. So we're on to another year of Atlantic League baseball, even if we can't see it because it's behind the $150 paywall that is Flow Sports. So with that said, let's go to the plugs. Let's get out of here. We're running on nearly 2 hours, so you know it was a good long preview, and hopefully we touched on everything that there is to touch on here. If you want to find links to the 3 news articles we mentioned today, that'll be on the show notes, which will be on IndieBallReport.com. If you want to follow the show on Twitter, that's at IndieBallPod. If you want to follow on Instagram, that's at ALPB_news and at IndieBallReport there as well. The show is wherever you find podcasts. That's TuneIn, that's Stitcher, that's Spotify, that's Apple Podcasts, that's Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, all the major platforms we're on there. So rate, review, subscribe if you can. And with that said, do we have anything else left to add in this 2-hour long preview episode?
Akira Schmid is my hero. That's all I have to say.
There's a reason I didn't talk shit last week because I knew how quickly this crap could change. And that's why I'm happy I didn't say anything.
Not talking either. I'm just saying Akira Schmid is awesome.
All right. I mean, that's perfectly fair to say. You know, I'm just saying we've been here before, even though I got to be honest, I have very low expectations heading into Saturday. Extremely low. So it's a lot of pain over here, but we're going to get through it, and we're going to leave it at that because I don't have much else to add. And on that note, with nothing else left to add, until next time, don't forget to play ball.